Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ashley Croft and I'm the CEO of Futurum Consultancy and Training. I'll say a few quick words about Futurum and then hand you over to Rachel, who will be delivering today's webinar. Futurum delivers specialist training and consultancy to government and to law enforcement in all areas of covert tradecraft, intelligence analysis, responding and dealing with major incidents and investigations. We also provide a range of services to the commercial sector where those skills are transferable, such as open source intelligence, crisis preparedness and management, internal investigations and analysis, and the use of analytical tools such as I2 Analyst Notebook. All our subject matter experts are experienced operational practitioners drawn from the government, the police, the National Crime Agency, the military, the UK Special Forces Group and the commercial sector. And that leads me nicely on to introducing Rachel Carson, who is one of our directors and our lead for open source intelligence. Rachel is highly regarded and knowledgeable in open source intelligence and its application in both the public sector and the corporate world, and she is able to draw on her extensive experience working for the police, government and the commercial sector. I thank you for your time and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Can you please make sure you all mute your mics? And if there's time at the end, we will take questions. And if you have any questions, please post these via the chat option and we'll try to answer them at the end. Because in the UK it is Remembrance Day, we have to finish on time today. And if we don't get around to answering your questions, we will circulate question and answers to you later. Also feel free to reach out to us at any stage, and the final slide will have Rachel's email address for you to do that. I'll now hand you over to Rachel and please enjoy. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Ashley. As Ashley said, I've been working with open sources for a number of years now, and I've seen firsthand how open source intelligence can add tremendous value in lots of different contexts. Some of these we're going to explore today. But OSINT is very much a double-edged sword because, as revealing and insightful as it can be, in the wrong hands, this information can be used to commit a wide range of crimes. So today, after discussing what OSINT is and what it can uncover, we're going to explore both of these angles to raise awareness of both the advantages and the risks posed by OSINT, and of course show you how to help protect yourself and your organisations against these risks. So let's start with an overview of what we mean by open source intelligence, or OSINT. Someone who is conducting OSINT is essentially using specialist tools and techniques to identify and analyse publicly available information. And it will be for a purpose. It will be to inform some kind of decision or action. Now, it could be action as part of a criminal investigation, but it could also be a recruitment or a hiring decision, or maybe an investment decision, or even an assessment of your own digital vulnerability. But we'll cover these in a little more detail shortly. Now, a key part of this definition is the term publicly available. The information uncovered through OSINT is openly and freely available. It's in the public domain. And whilst not exclusively, the majority of these open sources are now accessible online. The information that exists on the internet about a person or a company makes up part of their what we call digital footprint. And the digital footprint is a term that we're going to use regularly throughout this presentation. Now, at this point, many people will ask, well, what is it that's so special about OSINT? After all, anybody can Google. Well, first and foremost, OSINT is not just Googling. And even if it was, only between 4 and 6% of all of the data available on the internet is actually accessible via a search engine. Search engines work by indexing online content. Much like the index of a book, the search engines will pick out the words and phrases and so on from websites and will index them so that when we ask them a question, they can tell us where to find the answers. But only a very small percentage of what's actually available online has been indexed. And what many people don't realise is that the internet is actually split into three. the surface web or the clear web, which is what we most commonly associate with the internet. It's where we get most of our news. We read blogs and access some forums. We can view some, but not all, social media, and basically anything that can be retrieved via a search engine. That's the surface web. The second part is the deep web, and it's the part of the internet that sits behind some kind of wall. It could be a paywall or just a simple login. This content is not indexed by search engines because they can't access it without a login. Every time we use a browser to access our Gmail, for example, we are using the deep web. And some social media is also only accessible on the deep web. You have to have a Facebook account in order to view some Facebook posts. The same can apply to some government resources and corporate and academic records, for example, but it all depends on the jurisdiction. And clearly, jurisdiction can play a key part in online research because public data is less available in some countries than others. Records, for example, UK corporate records are freely available, including director information, shareholdings, and financial summaries. You can search for a person or a company name, and it will tell you any companies or offices associated with your search. Whereas in Hong Kong, for example, with unregistered access to the Cyber Search Centre, you can search for a specific company name, but then you have to pay to reveal any information other than the company type, the status, and the date of incorporation. And similarly, director searches are paid for. Now, the dark web, which is the third part of the internet and is frequently confused with the deep web, but it's actually a subset of the deep web. Now, the dark web requires a special browser, namely Tor or the Onion Router, to access. Now, you've no doubt heard that lots of bad things happen on the dark web, and I'm afraid to say it is true. Lots of bad things do indeed happen there. You can buy drugs, guns, credit card details, usernames and passwords, even Netflix accounts and fake ID. You can hire hackers to attack your computers for you. But not all of the dark web is used for illicit purposes. However, the fact that browsing and trading on the dark web is encrypted, it affords users anonymity, and it's why it's become a hotbed of illegal activity. Now, from an OSINT perspective, the dark web is hugely valuable for identifying personal data such as usernames, passwords, and email addresses which have been compromised. So this is personal data which has been stolen and is now available for sale on the dark web. So that's the first reason why OSINT isn't just about Googling. Now, in addition to this, what a lot of people don't realize is that there are a range of factors which affect your search results. And it's mostly driven by the fact that search engines try to make search results as relevant and as useful to you as possible. Search engines will try to give you results that they think you will want to see. So they'll use things like your location, so your IP address, previous browser history, and even the content of your Gmail account in the case of Google if you're logged in. And it will also use what you have clicked on before to give you what it thinks is relevant. So clearly this gives biased results. And that's why two people can conduct exactly the same search but get different results. Now, other things to consider are that different search engines will index content in different ways. So using different search engines will give alternative results. And also the device that you're using will also have an effect on your results. So search engines on mobile devices, for example, will prioritize websites which are mobile optimized. Searchers can also uncover a large number of false positives. So when searching for somebody with a common name, you can often generate millions of results that you don't want to see. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example for this. I'm just going to switch over to my Google search engine. So, for example, I share a name with a famous American conservationist from the early 20th century. So, searching for Rachel Carson gives 46.5 million search results. Now, nobody wants to trawl through all of those to see which of those pages actually relate to me. So instead, OSINT researchers will use techniques like Boolean logic and something called Google Dorks to take that 46.5 million records and find just a few that are relevant to me. So we know that I work for Futurum, and there is a dork called Site. So I start off with site : and there's no spaces, and then I go to the web address of Futurum. So it's futurumglobal.com. And then I'm going to put Rachel Carson in inverted commas. Okay, so what this dork is doing is it's telling Google to look exclusively at the Futurum website and to return only the pages which have been indexed with my name. So if I do this search, we've now gone from that 46.5 million, sorry, not thousand, million records, to just 6 that are specific and relevant to me. Now, there are several of these dorks which enable OSINT researchers to make smarter, more specific searches. Now, you may think that perhaps this is a bit too restrictive, but that's where research skills come in. A skilled researcher will now review these 6 results to identify any new topics or identifying features that allow us to follow a digital trail about either that person or the company. So, for example, you can see down here from one of the blogs on Futurum's website that I am the Vice President of Membership for the International Association of Crime Analysts, or IACA as it's referred to. So this now gives us a digital trail to follow. So I'm going to go back up to my search bar and I'm going to remove the dork, which is the site dork. And I'm going to keep Rachel Carson in inverted commas, and I'm going to type in IACA, okay, which is the abbreviation of my association that I'm vice president for. If I now click on that to search, okay, now we now have results from LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook that we didn't see previously. So what this opens up is information on projects that I've been involved with and all things which relate to me that we didn't previously know. So this type of research is known as following the digital trail. We're using known information about the individual to filter our search results. Now, the other comment I get very regularly is, well, I'm not on Facebook or Twitter, so I won't have a digital footprint. You won't be able to find me online. Well, I love a challenge, and in 7 years of conducting OSINT, I've never not found somebody yet, even those who use aliases. Now, clearly, some people will have much larger footprints than others, but by and large, someone's footprint is almost always larger than they realized. So why is this? Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but not having social media does not afford you nearly as much privacy or anonymity as you might think. Every time you leave a review for a restaurant on TripAdvisor or a book on Amazon, or every time you sell your kids' old toys on eBay, or even upload your latest cycle ride on Strava, you are adding to your digital footprint. And all the internet needs is a phone number or an email address to connect all of these accounts back to you. Now, some of you might still be saying, no, I've never done any of those things, so I won't have a footprint. But it doesn't stop there, because what we have described so far is your active footprint. That is information which you intentionally and knowingly submit online. But what you also need to consider is your passive footprint. That is to say, the part of your footprint which is out of your control. Online content that other people and other organizations are putting online about you. Now, this could include corporate information, obviously if you're a director of a company, but also quite often organizations will list their staff on their website. or ask staff to write a blog for their website. This will all add to your footprint. I mentioned data breaches earlier. Now, a high proportion of people have had their data stolen, and more often than not, they're totally unaware. For example, in May 2016, LinkedIn had 164 million email addresses and passwords exposed. Originally hacked in 2012, the data remained out of sight until being offered for sale on the dark web market site 4 years later. Now, these kinds of breaches are happening, and personal data is being sold all the time, and even more so since COVID-19, as more and more criminality is turning online. And even if you still say that none of this applies to you, what you need to consider is whether you have family members or a partner or friends or colleagues who are on social media. It's not uncommon to learn more information about someone from a partner or from their child's social media than their own. So your digital footprint is not just about what you post. Your digital footprint is as wide as your network, be it friends, family, or colleagues. You can be as careful and as selective as you like with your active social media presence and use high privacy settings. But all it takes is for a friend or a relative to tag you in a post on their open timeline, and then that is publicly accessible. And what's frightening is that these days, digital footprints are starting before people are even born. How often do we see baby scans on Facebook, often with the mum's full name, and in 6 months' time, notification of the safe arrival, giving us their name, date of birth, parentage, and very often even the birth weight. And you can be pretty certain that if they're posting things like this now, then we'll know the date and the time and location of their first tooth, their first steps, and their first school uniform. And there's so much more that is actually hidden on the internet, yet actually in plain sight. And here are a few examples. The first relates to domain registry. Now, it's often possible to research domain ownership using a WHOIS database search, although since GDPR, a large amount of domain information has been protected for privacy reasons. But when you do get a hit, you can reveal the registered owner and contact information. It's also possible to do the reverse. So for any email address, you can research whether any domains are associated with it. And it can even be a partial email address that you search for. I'm going to give you an example here, and I'm going to show you all domains which are registered to a ProtonMail email. So I'm just going to switch back here. And so this is a reverse WHOIS lookup, and I'm going to search for all domains which are registered to a protonmail.com. So it doesn't matter what the first part of the email address is. So I'm going to use the wildcard at ProtonMail. Oh, that's right, protonmail.com. Let's let go. And here we have over 186,000 domains that have been set up with a ProtonMail. Now, obviously, we can use, and we've just used the wildcard just to demonstrate that the wildcard works, but you can use that for any email address or partial email address. The next example here relates to archived content. So we say gone but not forgotten is the best way to think of web content that gets deleted or changed. The Internet Archives currently hold 477 billion web pages which have been saved over time. Now, this can be particularly revealing when conducting OSINT on companies to see how their website content has evolved over time. And this here shows that the snapshots have been taken since 2017 of the Futurum Global website. But it also shows how a cached version is available through Google. Now, most research involves pictures of some sort. We often say a picture paints 1,000 words, and so does a photo, but it can tell us even more than what you can see on face value. Behind every photo is data which tells you about the device used to take the photo and also where and when it was taken. Now, most social media strip this data. It's called EXIF data. But some platforms and websites do retain this. And when it does, it can provide some very revealing information about someone's whereabouts. With the example shown here, you can see it was taken with a Canon PowerShot camera. You can see the date and time that it was taken and its latitude and longitude. And this picture has been published in multiple locations on the internet. In the same way that we can search for words or strings of text, we can search for images across the internet as well. That's called reverse image searching. Now, in this next example, knowing someone's email address or addresses can really help when conducting OSINT. But even if you don't know someone's email address, it may be possible to work it out. Several tools exist which offer email permutations, and these are best guesses given someone's personal details. But there are others which will offer up the format of a company's email address. For example, as in this case for Futurum Global, you can see the most common pattern is first name dot last name. And there are other freely available tools which will validate whether or not the guest email is a genuine address or not. So is rachel.carson@futurumglobal.com a genuine email address? So with a little patience, it can be relatively easy to work out somebody's email address. Now, so far we have explored OSINT and what it can uncover. But now let's discuss how this type of research can be put to good use and how OSINT can bring significant value to corporate decision making. The first case here relates to HR departments who want to go beyond their traditional database checks to ensure the staff that they recruit are suitable and not going to cause any reputational harm to their organisation. Employees no longer just gossip by the water cooler. They can often take to social media to share their views or frustrations. And such behaviour can have a devastating impact on a company's reputation and brand. Now, from an OSINT perspective, red flags would include inappropriate behaviour or language, extreme views or opinions, or posting openly about previous employers. But OSINT is also being used to help substantiate claims made in CVs and, of course, to highlight any inconsistencies. But OSINT can have even wider benefits. The average cost of insider threat reaching nearly $11.5 million US. More and more companies are now leveraging OSINT to help prevent insider threat. They are regularly screening their employees and identifying early indicators like signs of dissatisfaction at work, excess spending, or a close association with a competitor. Now, these are clearly only indicators and on their own may not be a cause for concern. But when combined with other information regarding an individual, such as a change in working hours or excessive data extraction, it can start to build a picture of risk. Similarly, risk and compliance teams need to conduct enhanced due diligence to meet regulatory requirements in respect of anti-money laundering and countering terrorist financing. So OSINT can help deliver that enhanced due diligence and go further than the standard database checks, such as simply checking to see whether somebody is on a list of politically exposed people or checking whether somebody has a criminal record. An organisation or brand's reputation is clearly of importance when generating new or repeat business. So tracking a company's online reputation can therefore be critical to business success. And open source techniques are now commonly used as part of a company's brand management policies to help protect corporate identity. In a similar way, organisations are increasingly using OSINT as a means of monitoring their strategic threats and also the digital footprints of their competitors in order to try to gain or maintain competitive advantage. The next point relates to due diligence conducted by investors, which traditionally focuses on financial or commercial risks. However, these financial checks can't help to determine personalities, character, or cultural fit. And at the end of the day, it's largely the people who will make an investment deal worthwhile or not. So the use of OSINT by private equity, venture capital, the people risk, and therefore help to safeguard their investments. I'm sure by now you can recognise the value that OSINT can also add to investigations, in particular criminal investigations. Recognised as the largest global resource, OSINT has been pivotal in identifying suspects, witnesses and extremists for reuniting stolen items with their owners and tracking down missing people all over the world. The last example here is aimed at high net worth individuals and their families. Understanding what personal information about you is exposed online is the first step to protecting you, your family, your assets. And so OSINT evidently plays a significant role in this. Now, one of the areas I mentioned was reputation monitoring. So what if you wanted to understand your organization's footprint? Where would you go looking? Well, there's plenty to get your teeth into. For starters, online media is a rich source of passive media. Granted, it's not always reliable or trustworthy, but actually when you're assessing reputation and threats, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. The fact is it's out there and it's being read by your current and prospective customers or partners, and it's affecting your company's reputation for better or worse. So media is an obvious place to look. Next, you can't assess a company's reputation without also assessing the key people behind the organization, especially the decision makers. Their reputation directly reflects upon that of the organization. So this too should also be thoroughly researched. I mentioned corporate registries earlier and how their access depends on jurisdiction. But they can reveal sensitive company information, regarding company finances. So again, it's worth knowing what is publicly available, even at a cost, because people will and do pay for information that they want to know. A company's own website should never be overlooked for what it can reveal, especially as more companies are using blogs and other features and updates to help optimize their search engine rankings. Archived copies of websites can reveal historic projects which may or may not have a footprint elsewhere, and also can reveal previous boards and previous staff. The other area for companies to be aware of, as well as their domain registration record, is their own website source code. I've seen companies with client portals whose source code reveals their minimum password criteria. Now, this is gold dust for hackers as it makes their jobs so much easier. And it's possible to view this just by simply right-clicking on the mouse and viewing the source code. Now, the next two places to look regarding a company's footprint are online review forums such as Glassdoor and social media. Now, obviously, companies can have their own active social media that they put out, but when assessing reputation, there is tremendous value in monitoring the passive material posted by employees, ex-employees, and of course, customers or clients. And as well as the actual post content, hashtags can be equally revealing because they associate you with other posts and other online material. Now, lastly, of course, the dark web we've spoken about, and about the types of data breaches that end up on the dark web. And this isn't just a reputation management issue. It is a corporate duty to your staff and your customers to quickly identify when their data has been exposed and is up for sale on the dark web. Now, I've covered off some of the key approaches to assessing a company's footprint. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, a one-off snapshot will only go so far. And companies are increasingly adopting an approach of continuous monitoring in order to ensure that they are fully abreast of any online risks and can respond quickly to any identified threats. So let's take a look at a few examples which demonstrate the role of social media and exactly the types of content that we see. Last December, it was reported that an airport employee in Australia was dismissed. He had created a Facebook page under an alias, although he used his own photo. Now, several of his posts caused concern of his supervisors, but in particular, one post in which he demonstrated his support for ISIS in response to news reports of killings carried out by the terrorist group. In this case, it shows how social media has exposed a Hong Kong Sports Institute triathlon coach for infringing coronavirus lockdown rules, and who has had his contract terminated as a result. Despite being told to maintain social distancing and wear masks in public areas where they're not training, the coach was seen playing mahjong without wearing masks in a picture on social media. In this example, Bank of America fired an employee after she posted a rather unhinged and racist rant on her Facebook page. Another Facebook user noticed that this individual worked at Bank of America, and soon the bank was flooded with complaints via both phone and social media. And it's for this very reason that BBC employees have been warned not to share personal views on politics or other controversial subjects on social media or indeed any other channel. They must not advocate any particular position on any controversial subject. Why? Well, because it can reflect very badly on the BBC and attract negative media attention. Now, this can apply to anyone and anywhere who works for a reputable organisation, not just a broadcasting corporation. Their personal views can reflect badly not only on themselves, but also their employer. Now, this final example shows a headline which hit the press earlier this year and starts to hint at the more sinister use of information found online. This on the left is a list of top footballers, all of whom have had valuables stolen from them in recent years. And a common feature of each of these crimes is that criminals have spent time scouring the social media of the footballers and potentially their partners too to spot valuables. Now, criminals will often correlate their planned crimes with away fixtures in the knowledge that the property will be empty. Or in the case of John Terry, he posted about his holidays skiing with his wife, and whilst he was on the slopes, his mansion was burgled. Now, this is not exclusive to footballers or indeed celebrities. It concerns anyone whose digital footprint includes compromising information, which can include personal details, political views, location, interests, and much more. So, as much as OSINT can be put to good use to make best decisions and to support an organisation's risk management practices, the information which can be uncovered online can also be used against individuals and businesses by those with malicious intent. So this is the flip side of the OSINT coin. For cyber criminals, personal data is an absolute mine, especially if the target is sharing work details. So, as we've seen already, in the wrong hands, personal information uncovered online can make someone vulnerable. And that's why high net worth individuals are using OSINT now to better understand their online exposure and where their vulnerabilities lie, in order that they can remove or bury content which could be used against them. Now, in the case of footballer Dele Alli, we call this a cyber-enabled crime. It's a traditional type of crime which has been aided by the use of computers, or in this case, social media. But technology has given rise to another type of crime, which is committed entirely using computers. And these are cyber-dependent crimes. It could mean having your Facebook or online banking account hacked for malicious means, but it can also mean attackers using information which is publicly available about you to create attack emails, which contain personal information and look as convincing as if it was from your best friend. And this is called spear phishing. Spear phishing is a form of email attack in which fraudsters tailor their message to a specific person. And these attacks are targeted in a way that makes them appear more plausible. And why is this happening more and more now? Well, because most organizations have got really good at reinforcing their perimeter defenses. So attackers are exploiting an organization's biggest vulnerabilities, and that is their employees. And it's smart because if an employee takes the bait and clicks on a link, this will provide cyber attackers with the means to move past those preventative defenses. So this is how they do it. The attacker will gather the information they need to seem plausible by researching the target online, perhaps using Facebook, LinkedIn, or the website of the target employer. Then all they need to do is imitate a familiar email address, again, one that would appear at least on face value to be plausible. The message they send will either contain an attachment infected with malware, or it will direct the recipient to click on a link to a malicious website, which might then inject malware into the browser or request user credentials through spoofing. And this is where the big risk comes in, especially if they've sent it to a work email address. We've seen how easy it is to determine someone's email address. We know how easy it is to identify employees of a company on LinkedIn. Is there not a big leap for attackers to identify personal information about your employees through their online footprint and send them a targeted spear phishing email, which can then infect your employee's computer with a keylogger, for example, and which then records all of the information they type, including their usernames and passwords to work databases. If you think about it, with those credentials, the hacker could have access to client information, personnel records, intellectual property, the lot. And since COVID-19, attackers have exploited people's anxieties and their debts, and even posed as government services. I think you can probably guess what might happen if you click on access to your funds now. Now, spear phishing is a form of social engineering. And indeed, social engineering is often considered in the context of cyber attacks, but it has a much wider application. It can be described as the psychological manipulation of individuals into divulging confidential or personal information. Social engineering can therefore be used to facilitate corporate espionage by those with hostile intent. And social media is a goldmine to those seeking to identify and target personnel. The way your employees conduct themselves online can therefore make them and your organization unintentionally vulnerable to security threats. Exposure may occur in a number of ways, for example, through the posting or sharing of commercially sensitive information, but it could also be through employees behaving in a way which will leave themselves open to blackmail or coercion, or even through the identification of employees who harbour a grudge or show malice towards their employer or ex-employer. So let's look at a few examples. In July this year, Dixon Yeo pleaded guilty in Washington to espionage. He is a Singaporean national who used his political consultancy in the United States to target military and government employees using LinkedIn and other social media. Yeo admitted to using various social media sites to help him identify Americans who had access to confidential information. This second example relates to groups of Iranian hackers who are known to have extensive social media operations, in particular using Facebook and LinkedIn to profile potential victims and to establish relationships with high-value targets. This here is from a fake Facebook profile used by Hamas to approach his Israeli soldiers identified online to entice them into dialogue. And this example, this particular one here, resulted in the release of classified data. So through social engineering, it's possible to track the activities of employees and ex-employees and collect information about a company. It could even be information such as its values, its hierarchy, its communication patterns, the environment that it works within, and employee morale. And all of this can be uncovered without actually having to step foot in the organisation. There's no physical entering of the organisation. They can just do it all remotely. Now, a former FBI counterintelligence operative, Eric O'Neill, who played a major role in bringing down the FBI mole Robert Hanssen for spying on behalf of the Soviet Union, sums this up with this quote: "To spies, LinkedIn is interesting. You can use it to find out a lot of corporate information without even hacking." O'Neill also said that Chinese intelligence agencies have been amongst the most aggressive users of LinkedIn. According to the FBI, the Chinese have targeted companies producing everything from proprietary rice and corn seeds to software for wind turbines and also high-end medical devices. And they're seeking anything which will give them a competitive advantage, such as cost and pricing information, maybe internal strategy documents, and person identifiable information in bulk, so bulk PII. Now, the next step in social engineering is where it goes beyond identifying people and information online. In other words, it's about using the information uncovered to engage in dialogue. So elicitation is the art of using a conversation to subtly acquire information about a person, their life, future plans, their work and projects they're working on, and also about their work colleagues. So it goes beyond what is available through open sources, and it can even result in a face-to-face meet. It's not necessarily just online. And as with social engineering, elicitation has multiple uses that include helping to build a competitive advantage or gaining a more informed understanding of an area of interest. Now, the consequences of all these types of attacks could be vast. So clearly, the next question is, how do you best protect yourself and your organization against these types of risk? Well, the responsibility for security needs to be split between both employees and employers. This has never been more critical since the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seen a significant increase in the proportion of the global workforce who are now working from home. Now, Futurum offers a range of training and workshops to support organisations who are facing these threats, including social media awareness and elicitation and counter-elicitation training. We also conduct due diligence on behalf of individuals and organisations who want to understand the scale of their own digital footprint and where they are vulnerable and exposed. If you would like any further information, feel free to go to our website, futurumglobal.com, or I'll be displaying my contact details at the end of the presentation. But these next two slides give a flavour of what organisations and individuals should be doing to protect themselves and to minimise the risk and harm caused by the cybercriminality we've discussed today. So, an employee security education programme. The reason I've included this is that, as well as being their greatest asset, employees can be an organisation's greatest vulnerability. If you think about it, every employee is a possible attack vector. Employees therefore need to understand the tactics of phishers and what to look out for. They should be fully trained on security awareness and how to spot and identify things like a fraudulent URL. Test phishing exercises are also a well-practiced method for keeping employees on their toes. What else have we got here? Two-factor authentication. When deployed, it can prevent hackers who have compromised a user's credentials from gaining access. And even better, implementing a single sign-on is a means by which employees never have to manually enter passwords. As an organisation, I think the key to better risk management is firstly to understand your corporate risk and vulnerabilities, essentially your corporate digital footprint. And secondly, it's important to assume that an employee will click on a link because at some point someone is likely to. And therefore to implement security measures which will minimize the potential damages of a data breach. Now, the extent of these measures would obviously need to be weighed against the data stored and the risk associated with it being exposed. And from an individual perspective, there are some simple steps which will help to minimize both personal and corporate risk. High security settings are not by any means foolproof. This is on your social media, but they can, of course, reduce risk. And the important thing is for staff to understand what their privacy settings do and do not keep private. It's no longer as simple as having an open or closed account. Effective password management is as inconvenient as it is obvious, but being safe online is never convenient. Password generators and managers such as LastPass or KeePass are great tools for ensuring passwords are complex and unique, and with a little discipline can be used very effectively. A few other steps to take: don't save passwords in your browser. Don't use corporate devices for personal matters. Avoid public Wi-Fi because you'll end up using a network with others without a firewall between you. And as per the corporate steps, the value is in knowing the risks, and especially those associated with your own personal digital footprint, because that knowledge can be used for prevention and mitigation. And that brings my webinar to an end. I would like to thank you all for attending the event today, and I hope you found my webinar insightful. I will now pass over to Ashley, who's going to go through any questions that we have.